Moving into a new neighborhood at my age was something I never imagined I'd do. But after my divorce and with both of my children grown and living their own lives, I found myself longing for a fresh start. The house was charming, a little worn but full of character, nestled among rows of identical homes with neatly trimmed lawns. What I didn't expect was him. Daniel lived next door, a quiet man in his late 50s, with a warm smile and a penchant for gardening. I first met him while struggling to carry a box of books up my front steps. Without hesitation, he appeared at my side, his strong hands lifting the burden as if it weighed nothing. "Need a hand?" he asked, his voice deep but gentle. I nodded, grateful, and together we managed to get everything inside. That was the beginning. Over the next few weeks, our interactions were polite but brief, morning waves across driveways, small talk about the weather. But there was something about him that intrigued me, something in the way his eyes held mine just a second too long, or the way he seemed to linger on his front porch when I was outside tending to my flower beds. One evening, after a long day of unpacking, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of Daniel's freshly cut grass. He walked over, a bottle of beer in hand, and leaned against the railing. "Looks like you're settling in," he said, nodding at the half-unpacked boxes stacked against the wall. I sighed. "Trying to. It still feels new." "Takes time," he replied, offering a small smile. "You get used to it." And just like that, a rhythm began, late evening chats that stretched into the night, each revealing a little more about who we were, what we had lost, and what we were still searching for. The leaves had begun to turn, painting the neighborhood in warm hues of gold and red. Daniel and I grew closer, our casual conversations turning into something deeper. He told me about his late wife, how he never thought he'd feel at home in this house without her. I told him about my failed marriage, about the loneliness that sometimes felt overwhelming despite my efforts to move on. One afternoon, as I struggled to assemble a stubborn bookshelf in my living room, I heard a knock at the door. There he stood, toolbox in hand, a knowing smirk playing on his lips. "Thought you might need some help," he said. I laughed, stepping aside to let him in. As he worked, I watched him, noticing the careful way he handled each piece, the way his brow furrowed in concentration. There was an undeniable warmth in his presence, a sense of quiet reliability that I hadn't felt in a long time. When the bookshelf finally stood, solid and proud, I touched his arm lightly. "Thank you, Daniel." "Really?" He looked at me then, something unspoken passing between us, a moment that lingered in the air long after he left. It was subtle, the way my heart raced when I saw him across the yard, the way I found myself hoping he'd come over with some excuse to talk. And yet, neither of us crossed the invisible line that separated friendship from something more, until the night of the neighborhood barbecue. Under the glow of string lights, laughter and conversation surrounded us, but my focus was on Daniel. When he caught me looking, he crossed the yard, handing me a glass of wine. Our fingers brushed, and he didn't pull away. "I've enjoyed getting to know you," he said quietly, his voice carrying a weight I wasn't ready to confront. "Me too," I admitted, feeling the shift between us, the possibility of something beyond companionship. As the weeks went on, our friendship took on a new depth. We began taking long evening walks through the neighborhood, sharing stories of our pasts and dreams we once had. Daniel confessed his love for old jazz records, and I found myself lost in the way he spoke about the music that had shaped his younger years. On a particularly chilly evening, he invited me inside to listen to one of his favorite records. The rich melodies filled his living room, and as we sat side by side on the couch, I felt a deep sense of comfort I hadn't known in years. "This was our song," he murmured, a wistful smile tugging at his lips. I reached for his hand, offering a silent understanding. "Tell me about her," I whispered, and he did. Winter arrived quietly, blanketing the world in stillness. Daniel and I spent more time together, watching old movies, sharing meals, and walking through the snowy streets. The lines between us blurred, the tension growing but remaining unspoken, until one evening, as I stood at his door, something changed. "Come in," he said softly, stepping aside. The warmth of his home enveloped me, the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the faint trace of his cologne. We sat by the fire, and he reached for my hand, his touch tentative but steady. "I've been thinking a lot about us," he admitted. "And I don't want to let this, whatever it is, slip away." I swallowed the lump in my throat, meeting his gaze. "Neither do I." What followed was not a grand declaration, but a gentle unfolding, a quiet understanding that we were both ready to embrace this unexpected connection. We took things slowly, with the same care and patience that had defined our growing friendship. As the days passed, I found myself reflecting on how far we had come, from polite neighbors to something deeper, something richer. It wasn't just companionship, it was a rediscovery of who we were and what we deserved. One afternoon, as we stood by the window watching the snow fall, Daniel slipped his arm around me, pulling me close. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," he murmured. I leaned into him, smiling. "Neither did I." And just like that, I realized that sometimes the most unexpected connections are the ones that heal us the most.